Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another of the Bodhana series of webinar trainings. This one, I'm sorry, no, that voice isn't working at all. Hi! See, this is probably how you'll recognize me. I'm James. I'm going to be one of your hosts tonight for the Bodhana training webinar series of awesome stuff. And with me this evening, I have special guest. Say hi, special guest.
Hi.
All right. So tonight, we are going to be discussing educational gaming. I'm not going to say educational games because we're going to get to why that's probably a misnomer in just a second. So without further ado, we are going to get to stuff and things. Hey, look at that. All right. So welcome to the Bodhana webinar series for the Heroes of Gaming. Tonight, we're going to introduce you to Christa. Christa is our education specialist. And for this thing, we brought an education specialist to talk about educational things. This is Crystal Mazur. We are going to introduce in a second. Y'all know me. Matter of fact, I've been on so many of these. I'm not going to linger on this slide. Just been a therapeutic game master for Bodhana. Still trucking over 3 years, getting on 4 now at this point. Gloomhaven is life. Things you should know. Let's talk for a minute about Crystal. Crystal, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell everybody what the deal is, why you're here, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I have been an educator for about 15 years. I have worked with every single age group from infants all the way up to now middle school and high school. I have owned my own private daycare where I ran it and taught at it. I have taught for preschool for 4K and 5K for many, many years. I have been a special education teacher. I have been a special education support teacher or support aide. I am currently a 5th and 6th grade virtual teacher for a local school district. On the gaming side, I am a game writer and developer, which means that I write the games and take all of the writer's bits and pieces and make them into something that is coherent and doesn't sound like 15 voices contributing to one thing.
So do you in fact write the games that the whole world plays?
I have. In fact, I have games that have made it all the way out to Australia and Japan, which is really awesome. So I have worked on specifically role-playing games. The biggest one that you might recognize is Vampire the Masquerade. I wrote on Chicago by Night and Let the Streets Run Red, which are the 2 latest supplements for V5 that have been released by Onyx Path. I've also worked on several 5e games, so using D&D 5th edition rules. I've worked on Snowhaven, which is a snowpunk game, and I have worked on the Red Opera, which is literally set to an actual opera that you can find on Spotify, and you play all warlocks, and it is warlocks and their patrons and the give and take that is tragic with their class. So it's all warlock central storytelling. It's fantastic.
Nice.
And I am the lead developer. Yeah. And I am the lead developer for Pip System, which is from Third Eye Games. It is a family-friendly game, but you can use it for any genre. It is a genreless game, which means that we give you all of the crunchy bits and you put all of the other stuff on top of it. So I have written scenarios for it using aliens. Our latest one is cryptids, where you play cryptids doing cryptid things. That is literally the tagline for it.
Cryptid's got a crypt.
Cryptid's got a crypt. And I've also done like Gargoyles, the animated adventure. I did a scenario for that. So, but yes, I'm the lead developer for it, which you can find more information on the links below, including my personal website. I'm also a gaming advocate. I do run workshops for teachers specifically. I have run workshops for parents as well on using games and also comic books as educational materials. So I really advocate for the broader use of both of them.
So just in case anybody was wondering, why is this person here? Now you have all of the answers. So a quick reminder about Bodhana and their services, board game programs, therapeutic role-playing groups, which we're currently even running now online. Consultation and training, we do have a 101, 201, and 301 credited course for CE credits that we're going to be looking to run regularly now throughout the year. Our first one, our 101, is actually starting up in this month in January. Developing resources, game libraries, things like that, consultation, our Save Against Fear convention that happens annually in October, hopefully this year in person. And then as we do mention, the Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness book, which is how to use role-playing games in therapeutic intent, which is available on DriveThruRPG. And we will also be having a second book coming out super soon that's going to do the same thing for board games. And we will have Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness, The Deuce. So you can find out all of that stuff later when I give you the slide that has all of our links and things like that. So we're going to talk about the heroes of gaming today. Specifically, we're going to talk about one hero in particular. But the heroes of gaming were developed by us as character representations of what we feel like are the sort of the core disciplines that you can practice through gaming. Social skills, education, resilience, initiative, critical thinking, creativity, empathy, dexterity, because I can read lists. So all of that stuff is there. Now, the character that we're going to focus on tonight is in the picture, the Save Against Fear picture that you see to the right here, specifically Christa. Christa is named after the teacher, same first name, who unfortunately passed away in the Challenger tragedy many years ago. And we named this character after her. So as a nod, because she was an educator as well, and an explorer, you know, an astronaut. So why are we here? We're going to be talking about education in games. We're not talking about educational games because inherently, virtually every game has some kind of educational value to it. You would have to work really hard to find a game that does not have some sort of educational component, even on its base surface level. So our discussion today, and what I'm going to be talking to Crystal about, is really going to be talking about how to help, like, not only kind of identify the level of educational content you can find in a game, but give strategies for implementing games into educational activities, which I really feel like is the most important thing we're going to talk about today, and what I really want to try to give the most time for. And then making decisions on the types of games to include, and how to, we're going to talk about scaling games. And how to take a game that maybe the kids want to play, but you know, it's over their head. Well, rather than tell them it's over their head, there are ways to make it so that they can play that game, have fun, and still get some of the main concepts out of it. And this is where I pause dramatically. And then I make sure the Crystal is ready to go. Crystal, are you ready to go?
Mm-hmm. I am ready to go.
Let's talk about some education. So, core education mechanics in games. These are just sort of the main subjects that, like, if you gave them headings, the types of things that you would find in games, right? So math, social studies, language arts, science, art, music, social, emotional learning. And as we were talking about this stuff, Crystal pointed out, and rightly so, PE, like physical activity, phys ed. There's physical stuff in games, guys. I didn't think about it. It's totally right. I walk by in Target, I see throw burrito. every time I go through there. It's dodgeball with squishy burritos. It's fantastic. But there's all kinds of games that practice, manual dexterity and have physical components to them, stuff that'll get kids up and, get kids doing things. So probably something really important to identify here is that games do not have just like one component. Like you can't point at a game and be like, that is specifically a math game. There might be some that do that. But you're going to find combinations more than likely of a couple of these different things, which means that you can practice different skills simultaneously. That was my excitement face. So because games carry inherent educational components, we can evaluate them not on whether they're educational, but what degree they're educational. And at this point, because Crystal also described this to me as a sliding scale, I'm going to have her kind of take over here. Crystal, why don't you talk to us about surface thinking and deep thinking games, and we'll start kind of diving into what all this breaks down into.
Yeah, so when you think about where a game will fall within either a deep thinking game or a surface thinking game, there are a couple of ways for you to be able to do that. First of all, recognizing that the brain has 3 different levels that it operates on. There's the higher level thinking, and then there's the fight or flight response, and then like the completely shutting down and going into preservation mode type of response. When all 3 of them are communicating with each other, you can get into deep thinking. And so that's kind of the thought process behind deep thinking games, is you are connecting and going and looking further. So there's also like, I'm gonna use some terminology here. There's Bloom's taxonomy of a pyramid of questioning, where at the base you have like the surface level questions that you're asking. So in a game, it would just be like the base mechanics. Is it fun? Are you enjoying yourself? Is it a game? And then you go deeper into, okay, so what is the goal of the game? How do you win the game? And then you go even further than that. You go further up the pyramid and you go, okay, well, maybe this is a game where it questions history. So maybe I think it's called timeline, or chronology. Time stories. Oh, there's timeline too, I believe.
Okay.
You get a whole bunch of cards with different events in the history of the world, and you have to put it in order of where it comes
Chronology.
From. Chronology, that's what it is. Okay. So that's a very deep thinking game, because not only do you have to put it in order, but you also have to remember where in the world it takes place, because there's world history, but you can get it into smaller regions and stuff too. Or like music. There's this music specific one. I played that one. That one's hard. And then you can even go further and think of, okay, well, in those, if you wanted to go further with the game, okay, in those events, which one lasted longer? War of 1812. Okay, yeah, 1812, totally fine. How long did it actually last? Was it longer than World War I? Was it shorter than World War I? So you can actually go into further thinking on that too and break it down. Surface level games are going to be things that are at its core not super deep thinking, but will still apply in certain aspects of education. So things like finger dexterity. So moving things around the board. Tic-tac-toe is one where you have to kind of draw in smaller X's and O's on a piece of paper. So that definitely helps with finger dexterity. It can get to be pretty deep if you go into theory of it. And there's actually a really cool video on that that you can find on YouTube on tic-tac-toe theory.
There's deep theory behind tic-tac-toe.
Yes, there is.
All right. I legitimately did not know that.
he actually goes into how to make tic-tac-toe into a game where you actually have to use deeper thinking strategies. So, and it's incredibly interesting. And things like pie in the face, or what is it? Say it out loud, where you have like the dentist prongs in your mouth, and you have to say words. And guess what they
Oh
are.
yeah. Speak
I
it
think it's
or something like that.
shout it out.
That might be
I
it.
forget
Yeah.
the name of it. I forget the
But
name, but
it's like
so
this.
yep. So you have to figure out how to talk. So I mean, that is a communication game. Like even those type of games, I can go into. Well, that's communication. You're also learning, how to move your tongue and how dictation actually works by placing your tongue in certain areas when you can't actually move it like you normally would. Like stuff like that. So I mean, really, even those games can go. So it depends on what you're looking for. So every game can slide up and down depending on what you want to use it for, or even taking a complicated game and breaking it down, which we'll talk about later. So you
Right.
can actually make it less of a deep thinking game. So you can actually use it to talk to students about that may not be on the level of playing it at the base level, or the way that the game is introduced.
Do you find in the time that you've been an educator, that you've been working with kids, and you've obviously been using games in educational environments for a while, I think I would guess, and I'm only guessing, that there's less of this now, but did you find a lot of blowback or a lot of like fighting that, like, why would you bring games in here? Games are for fun. They're not meant to teach kids. Like, when did you sort of start to see this, like the pendulum is now swinging toward the acceptable side of things, or was it always just okay? Like, was it cool with the people that were in charge that you did this?
So when it comes to who has say in the classroom, there are actually three groups of people. There's teachers, there's administration, and then there's parents. So I've gotten both positive support and questioning from all three of those areas, almost equally.
Okay.
I will say, from an administration standpoint, most administrators, when I sit down and talk with them, support use of gaming once they see how it is actually used, if they're questioning it. Teachers have a harder time sometimes because they're in where maybe sometimes they're in a predicament where they don't make the decisions in their classroom. So preschool teachers, actually, there's a couple of preschool teachers where the directors and the administration actually make the curriculum for their classroom and they have no say over it. So it's harder for those type of teachers to either accept things because they don't normally make those day-to-day decisions, or they're in predicaments such as they're in a school that is religious based, or a school that may have very strict standards where they have to meet certain things in order for it to even be considered part of the classroom. So I've found that overall, teachers tend to be more questioning. I'm not going to say negative, because every teacher has a right to question what is going into their classroom and why they should be using it.
Sure.
Regardless of the setting. But that group, and it's not surprising that that group is, because of that reason, that they do have to question. They have to be able to know and understand why it is that they should be using this. And then parents, I've actually had, like, mom is super supportive of games, dad not so much. So having to kind of find where in between that goes, for students, and how to explain, well, this is what we're using it for. And most of the parents, when they see the results that their students are getting, or see the positive swing in other aspects of their life from this, such as critical thinking skills, decision making, even leadership or social emotional coping, they, once they see those results, they tend to be like, oh, I was skeptical and I have been proven wrong. My child is now exhibiting this at home and we never saw this before.
Okay. So surface thinking games, like we talked about, they tend to like, you really can't be rules heavy with surface thinking games. A lot of it, like, you can't complicate the game. That immediately starts to make it deeper thinking, right? So a tendency with surface thinking games, there's a little more, it's like, this makes it sound bad, right? But it's maybe not maybe a better way to say this. Like, the presentation or the style of the games are very colorful, they're very pretty, they're very like eye-catchy. You know, because if the mechanics are very light, you still want to have something compelling that grabs kids' attention. And we're going to talk about attention spans later, because parents, you already know where we're going with this. The mechanics like don't require like a deep understanding. It's one of those don't overthink this. It really is just roll the dice, do the thing, right? And that's what it is. Now, the cool thing about the surface thinking games is that it can, like Christa was saying earlier, it can still, you know, introduce or reinforce any of those basic concepts of the core education areas that we showed earlier. Some examples of the surface thinking games that I was talking to her about, like, just a personal favorite of mine from many years ago is Sorry. Right?
Yep.
It's so easy. They're just, you know, you have these things and you have to play cards to move them and get them home, but don't let your opponent bump you. Sorry. For me, part of that game is social because it's very lightly handled in the game, but it really starts that take that mechanic where you're looking and you're like, oh, I could send my opponent like back to start if I do this mean thing to them, right? But it's in the spirit of competition, and it starts that social development of learning how to be cool with it. Like, play games where you can compete but still be friends afterwards, right? Not like diplomacy. And
No.
Crystal's played
No.
diplomacy. She knows what I'm talking about. Another one, and this is actually a favorite of my son's, and he loves playing this when we're up in his room. Every Wednesday we play this when my daughter has Girl Scouts. Yeti and My Spaghetti, which, parents, if you have no idea what this game is, it's a very adorable sort of kerplunk style mechanic where there are bent plastic spaghetti noodles that you stretch over a giant red bowl, and in the middle of this like rat's nest of spaghetti strands, there's a plastic Yeti that's just sitting there going, right? He doesn't move or anything. And you pull the strands one at a time, taking turns to pull them, trying not to drop the Yeti into the bowl. And the person that drops the Yeti into the bowl loses, right? But it's, again, talking about that manual dexterity component. You want to like, oh, I pulled this spaghetti, but it started to move. Is there a way that I can turn the spaghetti and pull it and then twist it the other way and then pull it some more? Like, you start to learn that fine motor skill, like that dexterity of just, you know, subtly manipulating things as you're going. Those were just a couple that I was thinking of as far as like surface thought games. Crystal, I'm sure you have a lot.
Yeah, Don't Break the Ice is one. And Hungry Hippos is another.
Yeah.
So
I broke
yeah,
two
like
of those.
it's super easy games. But when you think about some of the things that happen with it, then you can, you know, attach it to core values, or you can just play it just to have fun. There's nothing that says that you can't just play a game in a classroom and not have it attached with something deeper, you know, on a day where, you know, it's snowing outside or it's cold, or, you know, like your students had a bad day. Go play, and just have fun with a game. Like, you know, you don't have to take a game and make it deeper thinking. You can just have fun.
Dare I say, it was cloudy outside and the sun was not sunny, but we could still have lots of good fun that is funny.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, no.
Was...
They're going to be cleaning up the classroom from a mess.
Only two things. All right. So then we also mentioned deep thinking games. These will usually have a more focused approach to one or more of those core mechanic areas, and that's because the rules can be heavier, and you can drill into the practicing of said skills. The mechanics will be a little more varied or a little more complicated. Decisions will be nuanced. The fact that you have to make decisions that are nuanced in the game and plan ahead. These games will put more reliance on creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. And something interesting that Crystal brought up earlier, the idea of fight or flight and engaging those three parts of the brain. Crystal, are you saying that you actually want to cause a little bit of panic in the games?
So what you want to do is you don't want to cause panic. You want to cause it to you want to wake it up just enough so that it's there, but then you connect it immediately to the higher brain so that you can also help in other areas for them to be able to connect and communicate. Because you don't want to shut it down completely.
Do you find
because that's bad?
Do you find that games are a good way to be able to do this? Because it's like you said earlier, you can play games just to have fun. So if you do these things to practice skills, but you don't say, okay, Timmy, it's skill building time, right? Like you just bring out this game that you want to play and they practice what you want them to practice, but they don't look at it and go, stupid class activity. Like you don't label it as, educational skill building practice thing. You label it as, like happy fun game time.
Yep.
Like do you find that has become like a healthier and better way to sort of introduce some of these skill building things by doing that?
So much like with the Bloom's taxonomy that I introduced before, when you're introducing games in an educational way, you also want to start off at the base and build up. So you want children to just play games. And when I say children, I don't mean like just the littles. I'm talking about middle school, high school. You can start this at any age. So you just want them to have fun. You want to get them to get the core things down first, such as the rules, and then both how to win and how to lose. So, and I think we have that coming up, don't we? Talking about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to go too far into that, but like those basic ones, getting those to be just an everyday occurrence. And then you can go into the deeper thinking and introduce like, hey, now I want you to focus on this part of the game when we play and pay attention to that part of the game. Okay, now that they've practiced it at that level, then you go further and now maybe you ask questions that take them away from the game. So like, hey, this, chronology introduced this. You had this come up in your timeline. Do you know anything about it? No? Okay, well, let's go research this. Let's go look and maybe find some facts about it. Or, maybe a teacher purposely puts that into the play for it because they want students to be investigating it. So they place it in the timeline and where it goes. And then the students then do a little bit deeper research on their own, taking that aspect away from it. So you can actually pull things away from those games and have the students or children go off and investigate it on their own.
I got duped into growing my vocabulary as a kid, specifically because we played Vampire the Masquerade. And this was the old, like when
oh yeah, there's a lot of
autocrat was
historical
Windows,
words there.
right? Because they couldn't use the word
Yep.
glossary at the end of it. They had to say lexicon, right? And all of
Yep.
the vampire powers had to be the big words for endurance. It was called fortitude. You know, so like I had to go and look up all of these words and start learning what puissance meant, you know, and obfuscation and chicanery, you know, like all this,
Celerity,
yeah, celerity, all this crazy stuff. I got tricked into like learning vocab to play this game. So yeah, I'm big proponent. There are like for deeper thinking games for I think like some of my examples are probably, I would say maybe like sixth grade and up. Probably. I don't know that I know a lot of like deep thinking games for the littles. But
we'll talk about how to take. We're talking about that later, where you can make something a deeper thinking game
yeah.
or not. But I have an example for a littles game, and it is based off of the game Memory. Okay, but instead of the traditional one where you just flip 2 cards, instead what you do is each card has an item on it, and then a number and an arrow pointing either to the right or the left. And you put the cards upside down in a circle, and or in like a half circle, depending upon the student age and stuff like that. And as a teacher, I always help to facilitate it, mostly because this game is also unfortunately out of print right now, but I'm hoping that they do put it back into print, which is why I'm mentioning it.
Okay.
So I tend to guard this one very carefully because it's very fun. But you point to a card and they guess what's under the card. And if they guess it correctly, you flip it over. And then you move that many spaces as the number to the right or to the left wherever it's pointing. And then they have to go around the circle and bounce around to get all of the items in the circle. And then after they guess them, they get to keep whatever they got correct. And the game is called Sherlock, and it has a dog dressed as Sherlock Holmes on the cover. So it's from Playground Games. But it's one of my very favorite games that takes a really easy game that almost every child plays and gives it a new breath of life.
Yeah.
In a way that is also interesting for adults. But it takes it to a deeper thinking, because now you have to strategize where you want to go. And, you know, like if you remember where items are at the beginning, you can point specifically to one and then go from there.
I don't ever remember playing that. That sounds really cool.
I bought it. Where did I buy it? I bought it at Gen Con. It was Gen Con one year. And I think it was the year after they stopped printing it. I found it on like Amazon and stuff like that. I suggest actually contacting Playground Games if you are interested to see if they would do a reprint, because they have done reprints of games if there's enough interest. Because I've seen it for like $50. If you're really, really, really wanting it, totally get it. If that's something that's just too expensive for a card game, don't worry about getting it. You can easily take an old memory game, add a number and an arrow to the images, and make your own.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I was thinking of, and we had some of the same things, like Ticket to Ride. One that I was thinking of when I thought about deeper thinking games was Splendor.
Oh yeah, Splendor's a great one.
Splendor's for those that don't know, it's an economy management type of game. You're drafting gemstones from a pool while you're using them to then purchase cards to build your own in-house economy and competing for victory points. It's a very simple game that only gives you basically 3 things you can do on your turn. but a much heavier like dynamic strategy to it. Even down to like, I've played the game so many times at this point that I already kind of have down if I'm going first, second, third, or fourth, how I want to proceed based on like what I think the other people in the game are going to do. I'm kind of insane when it comes to this game, but I mean, it can go that, you know, that deep, but it's the forward planning is really like one of the main components for me with that one. And just knowing where you want to go, how you're going to get there, paying attention to what your opponents are doing, responding to that, having like there's some resilience in there. And then, Crystal, you mentioned Smash Up.
Yep.
When that was a surprise to me. I didn't think about Smash Up, but yeah.
Yep. And what's really cool is that you can take it, and if you get enough of the packs, you can do like themes and stuff like that. So you can have your space cowboys going up against your pirates and ninjas.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, you can get pretty creative with them, and you can also strategize like if you like one specific one, you can pick and choose like and mix up different companion decks to give different strategies, because each deck has a different strategy.
Do you find that and this just kind of popped into my head, so I'm going to ask randomly.
Yeah.
Do you find that like the IP of the game matters to kids? Like when you're using this as like an educational component, like maybe kids that aren't such a fan of Star Wars, but you happen to have this Star Wars game, like does it preclude them from being involved because they're just like, oh yeah, I'm not a Star Wars person, you know?
I would say it depends on the IP and the child, first of all. In general, I haven't had too much of that, because if I have like a themed game, I'm not focusing on the theme or the IP. I'm shifting focus, and I'm making sure I shift the focus to something else, whether it's the strategy of the game, the rules of the game. I'm not like, oh, you didn't say Endor right, or like, or those are called Ewoks, and like if I'm doing that, I'm not focused on what the purpose of the game is.
Got it.
I will say using an IP to get a child to play a game is a good way to start if you are having trouble with them with focus or anything like that. So like Paw Patrol is one for, I'm gonna go for really, really, really young kids. Paw Patrol is one where kids just go bonkers for that IP. And they do have a couple of games like Spot It and stuff like that. That you can make very surface level games. Especially, I've actually used Spot It for my students that were in my special education program. I use that. So I use Theme Spot It because that's what they were drawn to.
As if to back up what Crystal's saying.
Yeah.
This was right next to my computer, everybody. This is an activity and coloring and puzzle book that my son has. And yeah, Paw Patrol all day.
Yep. Yeah. All day. I think it's because it's dog. Like it was like Pound Puppies when I was growing up. Pound Puppies were the thing.
Yeah, true story.
And this is just this generation's Pound Puppies is really what it is.
They're rescue pups. They're cute. I like it.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are some aspects of educational gaming, some things to consider while including games into educational activities. Crystal, do you want to walk us through the ones that I have listed here?
Yeah. So I'm going to say the points really quickly, and then I'm going to connect all of them a little bit more in depth. So the first one is let the child take the wheel. The second is challenge the kids to not just mentally, but physically as well. And then the last one is that can the game be scaled and is it necessary to do so? So, and if you, James, if you have questions or anything, please feel free to stop and ask.
Oh, I will.
So, so the first one is let the child take the wheel. And what I mean by that is let them determine, at least for certain aspects, what game they play. So if it is the millionth time that you have played Frozen and your child is still enthusiastically choosing it, focusing on the game, completing the game, and enjoying themselves, guess what? You're going to be playing it 1001 times. And that is because children in general have a lot of things that are out of their hands, out of their control. When you, as an adult, can let them have that steering wheel, even for a short amount of time, that means so much to the child that they can focus better, they have more fun, they are less likely to fight you every inch of the way. And they will be more susceptible, or not, I'm not going to say susceptible, that's the wrong word. They are going to be more open to other suggestions once you let them get it out of their system. Especially for really young children, if you start off with a game that they are interested in, you can, after you are complete with that game, eventually work in another game that maybe that you are more interested in, or that there is an aspect of that game that you want them to practice or that they need to practice. So maybe dexterity, maybe math, maybe talking, something like that, where they avoid it with the first game. But you can say, okay, we played this game. First we play this game, then we're going to play this game. So
do you do you find that the idea of letting the child take the wheel, you don't feel like this is the type of thing where, because I could see people having the argument that, like, well, we dictate to the kids what they play because they need to know that, they're not always going to be in control of things that, and they need to learn to respond to the world around them, or things like that. Like, is that a concern at all? Is that, how do you approach that?
So I'm going to throw this scenario back at you. Okay.
Cool.
So let's pretend that I am a child. Okay. From the moment I wake up, you dictate what time I wake up. You dictate what I eat for breakfast. You dictate where I go from there. If I stay home with you right now because of everything that's happening, whether I go to daycare or school, and you dictate what time I do it at. You tell me when I need to put my clothing on and whether I need to put on a jacket or a snowsuit. You dictate where I sit in the car because of where the car seat is. You dictate then how I get dropped off. So is it really quick? Is it something where it's a struggle? But you set me down and walk away because we're trying to work on that separation thing, stuff like that. Then when the child is at school, the teacher dictates when they have snack. The teacher dictates what they learn and at what time. The teacher dictates when they go outside. The teacher dictates when they have lunch. Do you see where I'm going with this? So as adults, yes, a lot of that thing is important because structure is important for children. Having a structured day is very important, but it's also important to let them take the wheel and make decisions when we have the ability as adults to back away. It is easier for us to give up the wheel than it is for them to give up that control. So allowing them that ability, it means more to the child than it does for the adult. And no, absolutely, you do not lose control, because even I'm teaching middle schoolers right now. I still have community days where I sit down and talk with them and ask them, hey, what would you like to see in our virtual school? Hey, is this working for you? Hey,
Yeah.
this is coming up. How would you like me as your teacher to give this to you so that you on your own, because you're virtual, have the ability to finish it? And then I always say, I always take into account what you guys tell me. However, I also have final say. So if it's something that I cannot accommodate or the school tells me I cannot do, there may be reasons why I cannot do something. So I will always tell, as an educator, why I will say it's not because I'm the teacher. It's, well, I may have stuff that the principals tell me I have to do, or I may have stuff I have to do because the state tells me I have to do it. So we have to have like snack in Wisconsin. We have to have snack. We have to provide food every 2 hours to 4 hours. Wait, hold on. I'm trying to do math here. I think it's like 3 or 4 hours. We have to provide, as early educators, a food source every 3 to 4 hours for students. So yes, that dictates snack, because that's just how it is.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and is it going to ruin us as an adult's ability to tell a child no? Absolutely not. For their own safety, you can still say no at any point. If you see a child with a game and they're putting something in their mouth that they shouldn't be, absolutely, you can tell them no. You can say, and you can take them away from the game too. If they are not using the game appropriately or respecting another person, you can say, as an adult, look, it looks like you need a break from this game. You're not using it appropriately, nor are you playing with the other child appropriately. So we're going to take a break. You absolutely can do that. So just because you give up control over the choice of the game doesn't mean that you don't have control in any other aspect of it. Okay. and that control is very hard for a lot of people to give up.
Yeah.
A lot of, and teachers and parents, that is a very, very hard thing. But it is something that if you're trying to figure out whether you can or cannot give up control, think about it like this. If you can't give up control, or like you are just on your last nerve with that Paw Patrol game, you can do an either or situation. We can play this game today. Tomorrow we will play this game. Or we can play this game first, but next we're playing this game. So you can do an either or situation.
All right. Thank you for answering that. Please continue.
So challenging games, not just mentally, but physically as well. This comes into play both. So there's a large motor and fine motor. So when you're looking at large motor, that's going to be the whole body. So everything from head to toe. If you basically, if you can fall and break your leg doing it, that's going to be large motor. When you're talking about fine motor, you're talking about things that are like unraveling knots, or, pinch dexterity, grasping dexterity, even things like hand-eye coordination, or like hand or eye-foot coordination is also considered fine motor. So depending upon the child and what you would like to do, or what you would like to see, is going to depend on what you do. So things like don't break the ice, so you have to use a tweezers. So that works on that finger dexterity, right?
Yep.
Especially like the pinch dexterity. That tends to be something that students, they're finding more and more younger students are having trouble with that, because a lot of the, and I'm going to get a little bit ranty with this. A lot of the finger dexterity is considered to be a female or feminine ability. So things like sewing and drawing and tweezers and stuff like that. From a larger societal standpoint, oh, women do that. So when I don't know if you and I were, or I don't know if you ever did this when you were growing up, but did you ever remember doing like the big sewing where you had like the squares with the large yarn and you would just make patterns in there and then you
Yes,
could pull
because
it out?
I had a home ec class.
Okay. So most people don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
Those are things that aren't looked at anymore as being part of dexterity or anything like that because it's considered to be sewing. Well, sewing's a womanly art. And I'm using that term lightly because
Sure.
women, anybody who identifies as a woman. So it's considered to be more of a feminine art. And so it's not used in classrooms because, oh goodness, heaven forbid we teach, boys how to sew their own clothing or fix their own clothing.
Well, if they don't know
shouldn't
how to pinch, how can they wake their friends up from a nightmare to save them from Freddy Krueger?
See, and there you go. So we're finding, and a lot of people are blaming it on video games. And that's not what I'm seeing in a classroom setting or as a materials setting. Because a lot of the things that are happening on video games or like with typing is very much a fine motor skill. My middle schoolers are still practicing that. iPads are using a lot of hand-eye coordination for things. You have to drag and drop certain things that are moving around the screen into a certain area before it stops. So those type of skills are still being supported in a way. Obviously, you can't do like the pinch thing with iPads as well, because when you start doing that, you start messing with the screen. So, yeah. Like that's something you just can't get away from. But there is still the hand-eye coordination. There's still stuff like that, that the kids are still practicing. So where is it coming from? Well, when you look at supplies and everything like that, the sewing kits have pretty much gone away. I mean, I had to look high and low for one for my class. And then I had, and then there's always just that ingrained, well, that's a girl's toy or that's a boy's toy. And then you have to work on breaking it. No, that's an everybody toy. Because it's in our classroom, it is for everybody to use. So
I didn't have to, and this will just be personal testimony here. I didn't have to use it a whole lot, but I, at one point in my life, worked for Rent-A-Center, which, I mean, I still feel dirty saying it, but like I went out to other folks' homes when they had, like, they would rent furniture from us, and where people might have taken that piece of furniture to send it to get like a cushion stitched or whatever, I brought a needle and thread and just in their house, 15-20 minutes would close up a rip in in a couch cushion. But that's because I was taught how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 2 or 3 basic stitches that you need to know to sew clothing, fix holes in clothing, or fix upholstery.
Yeah. Good skill to have.
Yes.
That's a
and
shame.
I actually find like so I do knitting and crocheting. I haven't done it for a while, but one of my favorite things is actually getting knots out of thread. I actually find it very relaxing to unknot thread, because when I was younger, that's what I did. Is I sat and, okay, well, we had yarn in the craft room in our school, but everybody was playing with it, so it's all knotted up. Okay, I'm just gonna sit here and unknot it. because I want to play with it.
All right.
So but yeah, so getting back on topic.
Yeah.
Games can and should be used across the board for everybody. Like if there is a Disney princess game in your household and you have a boy and a girl, there is no reason why either child shouldn't be able to play that game.
You know what?
Or a Paw Patrol game, or a Ninja
and
Turtle game, or anything else.
And again, I'm just going to say this out loud. My son has a memory game that is Disney princesses. My son's favorite color is pink. And I love that about him. And like, that is a thing that we will like never shame him, you know, because it's pink is classically a girl's color. You know, like we don't care, you know.
Actually, classically it's not, but anyway.
Well, I was taught. Yeah.
That mentality didn't start till the 50s.
So
anyway,
the third part of that question had to do with scaling, and you have what I've referred to, what I've spoken with you about this as the Mazur method for scaling games. So talk about scaling games for a minute and what, like, basically what this means. It's good to do it. Just kind of walk us through the thought process for that.
Yeah. Okay, so scaling the game means that as an adult, whatever adult that you are in that child's life, you look at a game first and you look at the rules. If the game has more rules than the age of the child, then this is just a base one. You have to obviously adjust it for your child. Everybody's brains are different, so adjust it for your child, up or down. But however many or however old the child is how many rules you should have in that game. So you look over the rules and see which rules you can take out for the time being. And you can scale it down. Now, when I'm looking at a game, if there's a complicated setup, and I'll get to an example of this in a second, if there's a complicated setup of the game itself, that counts as a rule. As a teacher, I always teach the children, my students, how to set up the game. They do the setup and the cleanup on their own. I do not clean it up. I look it over first couple of times they play it to make sure that they're doing it right. But I have them set it up and I have them put it away. So unless they're having a bad day, but those are other rules that. So my example of this is I taught 4-year-olds how to play Stratego. And I did it in a way that was very simple for them, which was they set up the game. That was rule number 1. And then I taught them, okay, on your turn, you pick one of their people and you look it over. And they pick one of your people and you turn it over and you compare them. Whoever has the higher number wins. Okay, cool. So they play for a little bit and they're getting used to it. And one of them accidentally discovers the spy. Okay. And this is where the second point comes in, which is let children dictate the rule or dictate when new rules are introduced. So this process came over a couple of weeks because it took the students a little, because they're four, you know, like, you know, Miss Mazur, which one's higher, 5 or 8, you know, like they're still, you know, some of them are still trying to figure out where on that scale is higher. So after a couple of weeks, they discovered the spy and they were like, well, Miss Mazur, this isn't a number, this is a letter. I said, yes, S is for spy. Like, okay, what does that mean? I said, well, the spy doesn't have a number, so he will always lose if you pick him. But if you use your spy, you can see and peek at the other person's number. And they're like, oh, really? Like, yeah. Okay, cool. So I introduced that. Then they played for a little bit, and then they discovered the bee or the bomb. And I was like, okay, they asked me, well, what does this mean, Miss Mazur? When we find this out, I said, well, that means that your guy blows up. So for a couple weeks, there was explosion noises going on while they were playing the game. And finally, after about 2 months of play and practice and setup and everything like that, they finally found the flag. And they're like, well, what does this mean? I said, well, that means you won the game. And they're like, wait, what? So after many, many months, they finally won the game. And at that point was when I introduced both players need to congratulate each other. Offer a hand, high five, whatever, say good game. Whether you win or lose, you stop at that point and then you have them pick it up or have them restart the game. So when it comes to rules, taking a look at what rules you can take away and what rules you can keep in. So Stratego was one that I used. That was the first game I ever did that on. And then I also did it with a couple of Lego games. So like there's a Lego Frogger type of game where you move it around and you jump over things. And there's a stork. Well, I just kept the stork on the side because the kids like the stork.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't introduce it until they're like, so Miss Mazur, what does the stork actually do? I was like, oh, okay, well, here's what the stork actually does. So I let them, ask the questions.
Yeah, and I can,
unless they were getting.
Sorry, I can testify to this working. My 3-year-old was enamored with my Jumanji board game, just like with the way that it looked, and there were animals all over it. He was very intrigued by the whole thing. And we started by just kind of letting him make up his own game because there was no way I was going to explain all the rules to him, right? So we'd been playing his own game for like a week, like 3, 4, 5 days. That he consistently wanted to spend some time doing this. And then he just one day pulled out the timer, started looking at dice, started looking at other stuff, and said, Daddy, what are all these things? Why are these things in here? What are these for? And I said, well, those components are used when you play like the actual game. I was like, I'm having a lot of fun playing the game that you're playing. The one that you made up is really cool. This is super fun. I'm like, but the game came with components that had a set of rules that somebody else came up with, just like you came up with these rules. Daddy, can we learn those rules? Sure. But yeah, there is that curiosity there. I was wondering if you felt like this idea of like kind of letting the kids dictate when new rules get added or having them kind of decide how things get adjudicated during the course of the game. Do you, and maybe this is 2 parts, do you find the kids ever trying to design something that just completely breaks the game and is just for their advantage only? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. I think more to the point, do you feel like this at all has the potential to show or teach kids that like, I can just make up my own rules to things because rules don't matter? Like I can dictate like, what I want to do. Again, like a different question than that idea of like ceding control to let them pick what they want to play. Like now we're kind of dictating how something gets played, which, and how that kind of plays out.
So there are a couple of ways that you can approach that. The first one is you only let them do the new rules if the other child consents. So consent, especially in early education settings, when I'm working with like 4 and 5K, the other child also has to be okay with that. If they're not, then I say I usually will tell them, no, you have to play by the rules right now.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that you don't have to later or in a different setting or with a different game. So there's that. The other thing is that you can give them the box after you've taught them the rules and said, hey, I want you to make up your own rules. Take the game. You know how to play the game, which is awesome, but I want you to make a new game. So now they're not thinking laterally. Now they're moving up in that pyramid of thinking up to higher. Well, now how am I going to do this? And they're moving into the problem solving mode.
Yeah, that also kind of develops their ability to overcome their own bias in a way, because they've already learned the game. Like they know how these components are supposed to work, but now they have to unpack what they've already learned and now like come up with something new, even though they are already think because they just learned this thing. Well, it's supposed to work this way, but now I have to come up with a different way to use this thing. So that's interesting. Okay.
And it's also awesome that your 3-year-old is getting into that curiosity stage. With the 3 levels of brain work, that's the upper one, completely in control there because he's very curious and has no fear at that point as to what's going to happen.
Oh yeah, it's really outstanding. I'm super excited about all of it.
Oh.
Yeah, he's going on 17. Yeah, he's.
Yeah. Just wait till he gets to 17. You're gonna be.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Yeah, continue.
So the third point is if the child is not having fun, let them play their own game. So, like, if it's like pulling teeth at home, in the classroom, wherever it may be, it's okay to just say, okay, this is not for you. Maybe this specific game is not for you. Do you want to make up your own game? Or even if you know you have a child who doesn't like games in general, because there are students that are like that. There are children like that. You can take the game out of the box. Take the rules away. Take anything that you think they might not be interested in and give them those pieces and be like, here's something. You can make up your own game. Here's a board and everything like that. Let them do that. A lot of times you can also take, I've done this before as an educator, you go to Goodwill, buy the open games that are there for like 50 cents or 99 cents or whatever the case may be, and put them in a bin. Then you take the boards and you take contact paper and laminate it with the contact paper. And then you can use dry eraser markers on it. So then you let the children draw whatever pictures they want on it or draw whatever words they want it and make their own game on it. So there's different ways for you to be able to do that. And then attention span is also a huge one. And again, this is definitely something that needs to scale with a specific child and how their brain works. But the general rule is 1 minute for each year of the child. So a 3-year-old is only going to have 3 dedicated minutes for you to be able to explain a game to them and maybe for them to play.
Better get the work in.
Yep. So if you have to have something where they work on it themselves or they have to do it, you need to have it initiated by them in order for you to kind of expand that amount of time. If it is something that they are truly enjoying and they get into that deep level of play, which is another aspect that I can talk about forever, play theory. But if they get into that deep level of play, you don't have to be like, okay, it's 3 minutes. That's the only amount of time that we have to play. No, you can let them go. Let them go
add
until
another minute after your birthday.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, let them go. If they end up getting pulled in and immersed in it, let them stay there as long as you want, because that higher level brain has now taken over control and is shooting information to every single part of their brain and is lighting it up and creating new neurons and synapses and connections all over their brain when they start to do that. You don't want to interrupt that. That's something that you want them to stay in as long as possible until they have their oh shiny moment or their frustration point.
Well,
and with games, especially with younger kids, I always have something else at the table if you need them to stay. Like you're playing a game with an older child and you need a younger child to stay with you. I always keep like coloring crayons or something like that there. So if they end up getting bored, they can sit there and color, they can sit there and build things or have animals to play with or whatever the case may be. So give them something else to do other than the game.
So, I mean, this all sounds really easy, right? Like anybody could do this, right? So there might be some roadblocks.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
Along the way. So I highlighted a couple of these that we're just gonna kind of review. Like familiarity can lead to boredom. The earlier example of, kid has played Frozen 1,000 times, right? It might be because they're avoiding challenge and because that game's just really easy. It's familiar. It's what they know. That's a hard thing to suss out, but can be because that's the comfortable thing. That's their comfort zone, right? Is playing that Frozen game. Why can't we just have fun? Don't tell them it's a learning thing, right? Like that's we talked about that earlier too. See, guys, you see what we're doing? We're bringing this full circle, bringing it all around. I don't feel like it. Why can't I pick what we play? Huh. I feel like maybe Crystal answered that too, right? Lots of there's a loss of attention. Activity takes too long. The idea that they like short attention span, and if it's something that takes longer than they're willing to invest in, this is an idea that I have also had to, not like super hard, but we had to have a small conversation about here at the house. The losing is a punishment, or they did something wrong to cause them to lose. If they're like, we as people get the idea in our head that if we've done something right, we should be successful all the time. Like we should just, if we did the right thing and we did what we were supposed to do and we did it exactly the way we were supposed to do it, it should just come out as a win, right? And that doesn't translate that way. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's just randomness. Entropy just pulls the rug out from under you. Sometimes somebody had a better idea that just got executed better. You got outplayed, son. Like there's things that can happen there, right? So the idea that losing is a punishment, or that they did something wrong, even though they did everything right, which can cause some frustration, as another potential difficulty here. Here's some ways to fix that. And a lot of this is stuff that we've already talked about. Crystal also mentioned the part assembly game maker activity. Go to Goodwill, buy a bunch of games, dump them into a bin, make one.
Small parts are awesome.
Yeah. And she also, just to give you another behind the scenes look at a conversation we had, she did also mention that a lot of well, not a lot, but like games at Goodwill, sometimes they're not going to have all the pieces anyway. Or they're missing a meeple, or maybe there's no die with that game. Spare parts, bud. I really like the idea of having an alternate activity at the table because it at least keeps them in the area. And they might, if they take a break, like look back over and be like, you know what, I'm ready to play again. I took a break, did some crayon work. Now I'm ready to go at it. My wife and I do that with our kids at the dinner table. If they're not eating dinner, their choice is eat dinner or do this fairly boring activity while you're at the table because everybody else is eating. So that's your choice, and you'd be amazed how much more food that they've put in their bellies when they have eat or boring activity. I really like the idea of treating kids like adults with gameplay and sportsmanship. The fact that you like have them shake hands before they start, compliment each other on a well-played game. It's that little league mentality. Get out there and shake their hands. They played a great game today, even if you crushed them 20-2. Right? Like go out there and tell them that they played a good game. Be graceful in your winning and your losing.
Even giving them sentence starters too, like giving them the words of, hey, you can say, I really liked how you did this. I really liked how you played this way. So allowing them, giving them the words, because a lot of times here, like trying to figure out how to say something can come off as being a poor winner or a poor loser. So giving them the right vocabulary for that is very important too.
Excellent. Reinforcing value in winning and losing. This was not like hyperbole. My father taught me to you can call it losing. I'm not saying that you don't call it like, we don't call it losing. We call it opportunities to learn. Like you can do that. My dad didn't do that. He did reinforce the fact that like when you lose, it is a chance for you to learn something or take something away, from what happened. You can review the way that the game went. You can start to find holes in your own strategy. Or instead of beating yourself up, like what Crystal just said, you can learn new things from your opponents. Look at the way that they did it, because maybe somebody else, believe it or not, like, somebody else figured out a better way to do a thing than you did. I am constantly telling my kids, you are a very important part of this world. You are not the center of it, right? Like everybody's got something to add, some for ill, some for good. Everybody's got something to add. And this last one I put all in capitals because I was so excited, because there was a professional that I talked to that said the same thing that I've been saying in this entire training series that I've been doing with Bodhana for the last couple of months. Don't let them win. No, you must bring your A game all the time. Have you guys not seen Hallmark movies? Right? Where the kid finds out that his grandfather let him win at chess the whole time. And then he cries at the window while the snow is coming down. He's not crying because the snow is beautiful. He's crying because he's not as good at chess as he thought he was. Sorry, that was my rant for the...
No, yeah, it's like the whole, meeting your heroes and realizing they are not the people that you thought that they were type of thing, where you're like, oh, I always won at this. Oh, they let me win. And now when I go and play everybody else, now I'm horrible at it. And I don't find this to be fun.
Yeah, that security blanket can get ripped away real quick. With that type of thing. And you don't develop the skills at that point. If somebody lets you win, you're not being challenged. If you're not being challenged, you're not being pushed to get better. Crystal, is there anything else that you would like to add at this point that we did not talk about?
So a couple of things. Parent and teacher imposter syndrome are real, especially with this. And you will at points feel like you are failing your child completely, or the students or whatever, because what you do isn't working. I will reiterate Mythbusters. Failure is always an option. Even as a teacher, as an educator, as a parent, you are not perfect beings. You are not expected to be perfect beings. And if you are expected to be perfect beings in your workplace, you need to have a discussion with your administrators. Because you will implement things that just don't work. Because either it worked last year and now your whole new group of students are not the same, or your child may not fit exactly where we are talking, which is we're talking in the middle of the road. If you have a child that is out here, they are going to need and require different things. Maybe your child needs to be challenged way more, or you want a child you're challenged way more, but they're way back here. So you have to also adjust your expectations, and you will fail, and it is okay. There is nothing that says that you have to be perfect at this, and there's nothing that says you have to use this stuff either. Like if this does not work for your classroom or your home at this point, don't use it. Use what is working for you.
Good advice. Solid. So if you would like for more information on how to fund this training, any others that we've done, or any of the other stuff with the Bodhana Group, you can find us at thebodhanagroup.org or our at gmail.com. If you want to drop us a line, ask us a question, tell us we're doing great, tell us that maybe I don't have a face for TV, but I mean, that's mean, but you could say it. Find us on Facebook, Bodhana Group. We are at the Bodhana Group on Twitter. There's a theme, folks. You can get Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness on Drive-Thru RPG. And don't forget our Save Against Fear convention is going to be coming up in October of 2021. It will be in York, Pennsylvania. We try to bring all kinds of folks to us, and we are going to be keeping the online component this year of doing different panels and things like that, so that we can get folks that maybe can't make it to us physically, but that we feel are valuable voices that we would like you to hear from. Folks like Crystal, which I would really seriously thank you for joining us for this thing. This was really awesome.
I love working with you guys.
Thank you. The sheer content that you were able to drop this evening was super worthy. I learned things, and hopefully everybody else did too. For upcoming webinars, if you would like to learn things, next week, Jack is going to be doing a presentation. It's our next Behind the Screen on No Thank You Evil, which is a game that is that can be run for the littles all the way to older kids, and it is as we talked about, totally scalable.
Yep.
You know, depending on the
I ran it
rules.
for my husband's mother. It was her very first role-playing game.
How did she like it? Did she like it?
She loved it. She's like, "Oh, this is what you guys do." I'm like, "Well, yes." we actually play evil characters because it's vampire, but yes, this is role-playing.
The following week after that, Jack and I are going to be having a discussion about social deduction games and breaking down some of the psychology behind social deduction, coming up with kind of a development of social deduction games, because there has been kind of a progression of where they started versus where they are now, how they've gotten a little more nuanced. Then beginning of February, we are going to have another special guest on with Jack to talk about mature content at your table and how to introduce adult themes into RPG games. And then for a super fun night on Valentine's Day, the 14th, because it happens to fall on a training day, Jack and his wife, Jen, who also works for the Bodhana Group, and myself and my wife, Steph, are going to be talking about couples gaming in a webinar, and we're actually going to be playing a couple of couples games with a couplet, if you will. I don't think I will. Yeah, and then we're gonna talk about those games and talk about the strategies for couples gaming. Sure. So if you would like to join us for any of those, just log on at the bodhanagroup.org and sign up for those trainings. You will get the link and be added in here to get the training. And then on top of that, have a special Q&A session with the people that did the training so that you can ask questions about all of the stuff we just filled your head with, right? So that's it, folks. We have educated you this evening. I'm going to say thank you again to Crystal Mazur for joining us. Thank you all for consuming this and continuing to consume this and helping us do what it is that we do and bring good games to the table. I was going to say good games to life, but then that was too close to GE and I didn't want to get sued. So with that, I am going to bid everybody a good evening, happy gaming, and hopefully we will see you in the real soon when we can sit next to other people. Night.